Hey there, I'm Rachel Ehring, and you're listening to the Top Music Piano Podcast. Get inspired as we discuss creative resources, trends in piano pedagogy, ways to grow your income and streamline your studio, and new ways to engage your students each week. If you are a teacher who wants to go beyond the method books to create an innovative studio that fosters lifelong music makers, you've come to the right place. Thank you for joining me today, piano teachers. If you have ever finished teaching at 7 p.m. and felt that pit in your stomach because you have no idea what's for dinner and you're starving, today's episode is for you. Hailed as a fireworks soloist, New York City area-based violinist and historical performance specialist Sarah Jane Kenner is a multifaceted artist who performs throughout the U.S. and internationally. Sarah made her Lincoln Center solo debut in 2018 as a soloist with Juilliard 415, Juilliard's period instrument ensemble. Her regular engagements now include performances with groups such as the English Concert, Trinity Wall Street, Tenet Vocal Artists, New York Baroque Incorporated, and the Sebastians, among others. She has also enjoyed giving recent solo recitals with the Gotham Early Music Scene and Ars Musica Chicago. Sarah is also a talented cook and the creator of the popular blog, The Hungry Musician. On this platform, she shares delicious recipes and kitchen tips to help make cooking more enjoyable and accessible, and offers cooking classes and meal prep coaching specifically for musicians. Here's my interview with Sarah. Hi, Sarah. Welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here. I'm excited to get to know you and learn a little more about what you do. Could you start by introducing yourself?
Absolutely. And thank you so much for having me. I'm Sarah Kenner. I am a violinist and I am a food creator in the New York City area. I have been running my blog, The Hungry Musician, for I think it's almost 15 years now, which is sort of crazy. You know, I've been blogging since it was only on computers. Back when it was actually called blogging still. I think people don't really use that word anymore. I've always really loved cooking. I've always really loved music, and they've been a part of my life for as long as I can remember. And so it just seems sort of like a natural thing to do for me to sort of put them together and have this creative endeavor that fuses the two together. So
yeah, I'm excited to talk about food today, and specifically as musicians, how we can feed ourselves better. Because sometimes we get so busy that just falls by the wayside. I would love, before we get into that though, to hear a little more of how this all came to be. Where were you at in your life when you decided to start the blog, and what prompted it?
yeah, so I started my blog. I was a sophomore in college, and I had just come off of my first year as a violin performance major, and I was studying at a music school within a university. I went to Temple University, and I had a really busy first year. You know, you're at a university, so you're taking all of these other classes, and in addition to that, you're also have your juries, you have your piano classes, you have all of this. And I came in and I was so determined. I was so excited to finally be in an environment where music was all I was doing. So I really went for it. And I was in the practice room. You know, I was a stereotypical music student. I was in the practice room until 3 or 4 a.m. I was sitting in the practice room, just like eating whatever I could get my hands on just to stay awake, you know. And by the time my sophomore year rolled around, I just realized that it wasn't a sustainable way to live. And I needed to figure out some way to have more balance in my life, not just in terms of, you know, what I was eating, but also in terms of what I was doing with my time. And so I started the blog sort of as a way to record my adventures in the kitchen on this pursuit to make food sort of the basis off of which I was creating this balance in my life. So I had just moved into an apartment where I had a kitchen. So the year before, obviously, I was living in a dorm. And so it was, microwave oatmeal in the morning. And like, I was doing what I could with what I had, but I finally had a kitchen. So I was like, yes, I love cooking. So let's use this as an opportunity. And what I found was that even just by focusing on that one thing, which was creating meals that were both fun for me to make and fun for me to eat, I found that everything sort of naturally fell into place for me. I was in the practice room less, but I was getting better faster at my instrument, which we all kind of know that that's how it works, but we all have to kind of get there on our own. And so that was sort of how I started to come to that realization, was because I was spending more time taking care of myself and less time practicing. And yet my practice time was more valuable. And so I was using it better. And it was just a really sort of aha moment in my life. And so that's really, my blog didn't start necessarily as a way for me to share this with the world of like, oh, look at how great it can be if you cook for yourself. It was more of a way for me to just record my adventures. But it evolved into this where I realized the value behind what cooking was doing for me and what it had the potential to do for others. And so that's sort of how it's evolved to what it is today. But yeah, it just really started as, let me start posting pictures of what I made for dinner last night.
Do you remember what some of those very first blog posts were?
I remember one time I had someone over and we made a spinach pie, but it wasn't like my recipe. It was a recipe out of some cookbook. So it wasn't like I was posting the recipe. It was just like, hey, my friend came over and made the spinach pie. It was delicious. Yeah, it didn't really start as a recipe blog either. It was more so just like, hey, look at this recipe I found and I made it. And here are some pictures. When it finally turned into like a recipe blog, I'm trying to think of some of my favorite like early recipes. I've actually taken a lot of them down because they were not like well tested at all. So I was like, I don't know if I want these in public for people to make at home. But oh man, I actually have a recipe on my blog, probably one of the oldest ones that I've kept, which was for a blueberry muffin granola. Yeah, it's really good. I use cornflake cereal and oats, I believe. So the cornflakes kind of give it that like a corn muffin kind of flavor. And then I use some butter in it to make it taste sort of like a muffin, and then dried blueberries. It's really good. It's one of my favorite early recipes. So I think I've kept that in there. The blog has also evolved in terms of the recipes that I'm posting now. So back when I started, I wasn't professional yet. So I was still sort of taking my time in the kitchen, and I had more time on my hands, I guess. And so I was not shying away from things that took a long time or had a lot of steps. These days, I have a little bit of a different niche. I'm more prioritizing the ease and the fewer ingredients or fewer steps. And so, yeah, but we've come a long way since then.
Yeah. So it sounds like it's become a lot more focused. Tell us a little more about what it looks like today. What is your focus and your niche?
My focus and my niche today, I mean, I know that my audience is primarily musicians whose lives look at least somewhat similar to mine, which is to say that they're freelancing. They may have several different things that they do. So they may be performing and teaching and have a side hustle, or they may be performing full time and they're on the road all the time, and they have limited time at home, and so they want to make sure that when they're at home they can really enjoy their time. And these are all things that I've experienced at different times in my career. And so at this point in my content creation, I'm really trying to prioritize things that are not only accessible for people to make easily at home, and there are different types of accessible when it comes to cooking. So that could be, it happens in 30 minutes or fewer, or it could be that it only takes one pan or one pot, or it could be that it has 5 ingredients or fewer, and there's different forms that it takes. But my goal is always to have those recipes be elevated or feel special in some way, and to have it teach you something. So in all of my blog posts, or almost all of them, the most recent ones I've been trying to include this more, but you'll find lots of tips and tricks embedded in them so that as you're cooking, you can learn things that you can take with you into perhaps your own creative endeavors in the kitchen when you're just sort of riffing on a recipe.
Nice. Okay. So we're going to get into some practical things here in a minute. But before we do, I am one of those musicians who've often fallen into the trap of I just grab the fastest, easiest thing when I'm most stressed and most busy. I'm like, what's quick? What can I grab? How can I avoid doing that? Help me out, Sarah.
So first of all, I want to just say that I think that fast and easy gets a bad reputation.
Mm-hmm.
And there are two things that I think I would say to this. And the first is that it's really important for us to have grace with ourselves. If you have a week or a season in life, like say it's, Messiah season and you've got to play 4 Messiahs this weekend, right? And you have rehearsal every single day. It's important to be realistic at that time in that season about what you can realistically handle as far as cooking at home. Because I find that, when we set goals that are maybe not realistic, we're far less likely to be wanting to achieve them or to even be able to achieve them. But when we set goals that are purposefully low, they're much easier to achieve. And then you get that reward of, oh, look what I did. So I guess the first thing I would say is to, in those times when you're feeling stressed and you're feeling like, oh God, I just want to grab the fastest and easiest thing. That would be the time to maybe lower your expectations of yourself on purpose, because you'll feel more accomplished when, let's say, you just say, okay, well, I've got 4 Messiah rehearsals this week. There's only one night this week that I can cook. So I'm just going to commit to taking that one night. I'm going to make a big pot of chili and I'm going to have that for the whole week. And that's all I'm going to ask of myself this week. And if that's too much, that's too much. But at least you're not saying, okay, well, I'm going to get home from rehearsal on Tuesday and then I'm going to cook. And then on Wednesday, I'm going to do this and do that. If you're setting yourself up for success, you're going to be much more likely to achieve your goals if your goal is to be grabbing things on the road less, right? The other part of this, which I think is equally as important perhaps, is to sort of remove morality from the equation. And not only to remove morality, but actually to see fast and easy and grabbing things on the road as a tool that help us toward our goals rather than something we need to shy away from. So I would sort of equate it to like when you're practicing a really hard passage and you need to step away from it to get clarity and come back later. That's sort of what you can look at it as when you're on the road and you're grabbing something fast and easy. Instead of saying, oh, I really shouldn't be doing this. I really, I wanted to cook at home tonight. Instead of having that message, we can say, you know what? I'm going to do this because it's going to make it easier for me tomorrow. Instead of expending energy that I don't have today on doing this thing that I said I was going to do, I'm just going to allow myself, this. And there's so many reasons why we might need to do that, whether it's time, money, energy, resources, we can all be short on those at any given time. And so rather than beat ourselves up, I think, my big thesis is I like to say set realistic goals and be okay with not sticking to them. Because if we allow ourselves that flexibility, we'll be far more likely to want to come back later
Yeah, thank you. That's really a good mindset shift, I think. And if I'm hearing you right, fast and easy isn't a dirty word or two dirty words. But I think maybe what you're saying is we can do it in a way that we don't have to feel guilty about. So for me, like maybe fast and easy might be grabbing a salad at Trader Joe's on Sunday that I can have on Tuesday rather than a bag of chips that happens to be laying around the office or something like that, where if I'm kind of planning for fast and easy, it doesn't have to be a negative thing and it doesn't have to make me feel gross. Like, going through the drive-through probably isn't going to fuel my body in the same way as planning for something that I can just grab.
Oh, sure. I mean, and it's also like it depends on where your mindset is in at that moment. If you are sitting there and you've made the conscious choice that, you know what, I think that going down the street to get, a burger and french fries right now sounds so good. And that's what you are wanting. I'm like totally a proponent of, have what feels good to you in the moment, because it's not always to me simply there's so many factors that will go into why I make a decision to, cook or eat what I eat. And it's not always simply practical. There's an emotional component to the food that we eat. And so if you're going to feel satisfied by the bag of chips that is sitting there, then, and I personally see nothing wrong with that. But if you know that it's not going to make you feel your best, then absolutely having fast and easy things that you take with you or that you set up for yourself so that you still have that fast and easy component, but you're not having to resort to things that are maybe not going to set you up for success that day, then, I'm totally all for that as well. I am a huge fan of semi-homemade sort of convenient components that you can have at home that make the whole process easier.
Yes, me too. I call it assembling. I say I'm not that great at cooking, but I'm good at assembling. I can take the kind of partially pre-made stuff and put it together. So let's talk a little bit about music teachers. Often music teachers have this wild schedule where they're teaching after school, maybe till 7, 8 o'clock. And then what happens next with their food? I think it really is an issue for music teachers. And I would love to hear your recommendations.
Absolutely. So I have tons of little meal prep tips and tricks. So if I start like going off on a tangent, please cut me
No,
off.
I love it. The more practical, the better.
Yeah, the weird schedule thing. We as musicians, we have very strange schedules. We often work weekends, right? And we work until late in the day. We often are when most people are sort of winding their day down after school is when teachers are often picking up most of their work, right? It's like after 3 or 4 p.m. So I think it can help a lot to sort of release ourselves from what a traditional meal prep schedule looks like. So I don't know, when I think of meal prep, I think of, it's nighttime. You've got, Tupperware containers everywhere. You've made all your meals for the week in one night and then you're done. But that's not really always going to be realistic. So for me, one of the things that I love to do is either meal prep at quote unquote the wrong time of day. So like make dinner in the morning if you have time in the morning, or meal prep in stages, which is to say, for example, chop vegetables in the morning, marinate the protein in the afternoon between students. You've got like 2 minutes. All you do is throw the chicken in the bag with the sauce, put it back in, and then go on to the next thing. And then after the students are done, you go into the kitchen, throw everything in the pan, and then you cook. But you've taken like 20 minutes off of the prep time because you used time that you had earlier in the day to sort of do things gradually. One of the big things that I push for in my cooking classes and just in general is when you get a recipe, read it through all the way first And I find that that really helps you to pick out the pockets of like, oh, so I mean, I can basically like chop the vegetables and then that's most of the prep time. And so what if I were to schedule that at a different time of day so that I don't have to worry about that part? I think breaking down barriers and removing barriers as far as, a recipe is concerned, but even in a broader sense, I guess, is really, really key for us teachers and performers being able to fit cooking into our lives. So I would say that's one of the big things. Another thing that I really love to do, another tool that I love to use is sort of component meal prep, which is, it sounds a lot like sort of what you were getting at, which is like sort of the assembly idea. So whenever I have time or a burst of energy, I will just chop as many vegetables or ingredients as I have time to and energy to. So, for example, on like a Sunday or a Sunday night or a Monday morning, chop up a bunch of peppers and I'll have a bunch of onions. I'll chop up some carrots or cucumbers. And then I have, veggies chopped all ready to put in whatever I want to do. So maybe it's a salad, maybe it's a veggie scramble, a grain bowl, a pasta, or whatever it is. I don't have to do that step anymore. And so, and I often find that when people don't want to cook, it's just because they don't want to chop.
Yes. And I'll be honest, I've been known to buy the pre-chopped vegetables because I think, okay, I could buy this big thing of celery and it's going to rot in the drawer because I don't feel like chopping it. Or I could pay a little extra for the ones that are already chopped that will make it so much easier and I'll actually use them.
Absolutely. No shame at all. I really think, whatever you know yourself best, we all know ourselves best. And so it's about removing the barriers that are barriers for us, right? So what might be a barrier for me might not be a barrier for you or for someone else out there who's listening. But we identify what those are and we find ways to either get around them or just remove them entirely. So yeah, that is a big one for me. And the semi-homemade thing that we were just talking about too, I lean into that a lot. I'm not ashamed to say it. For example, there was a dinner I made just the other week that was so good. It was really fun to make and it was delicious. I made fish tacos. I got some breaded fish from the frozen section. I got some nice tortillas. I bought a salad kit, which I used as a slaw on it. And while the fish was cooking in the oven, I had a mango randomly lying around. So I made like a mango salsa. And that was the homemade component. And I got to use up a bunch of veggies that I had in the fridge. And it was a really satisfying meal. And that's an example of like, you don't have to do everything from scratch. You don't have to go the hardest route. You don't have to, have everything be just so. You can rely on convenient things and have a great experience cooking and eating and feel really good after. So that's another thing, is definitely not being afraid to lean into semi-homemade. And that can also go for things like frozen rice, frozen vegetables, pastas, grains, other shelf-stable things that are convenient that you can make really quickly. Having those around and making sure that they're, always stocked in your kitchen, it's going to be much easier to, if your priority is to cook at home, it's going to be much easier to do that if you have these components that you can pull from where you're like, oh, I really want to make a grain bowl, but I just don't have time to, make the grains in the, rice cooker. You could like, I'll just grab one from the freezer and then you have, a perfectly acceptable grain bowl. So yeah.
I never think to make green bowls or like bowls in general. And I wish I did because I order them at restaurants and they're always so good. And I think that's a really good way to just kind of throw some stuff together that you already have in the refrigerator.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I do it all the time with like tofu and random vegetables that I have lying around. We're big fans of the salmon bowl. So, in the time it takes to roast, a little thing of salmon, I can chop up some cucumbers, maybe toss them in a little vinegar or sesame oil, and then have a little sort of semi-pickled cucumber situation with some avocado and maybe some pre-shredded carrots. And in the time it takes the salmon to cook, dinner is done. So it's like 20 minutes. So big fan of that with the frozen brown rice under it is amazing.
I love it.
Yeah.
So I also love my slow cooker. Just coming home from work and smelling that dinner is already ready. I'm like, oh, look what I did for myself. It's like the best feeling. Do you have any slow cooker recipes? Do you like the slow cooker, or is it not really your thing?
It's funny you should ask. So it's not necessarily my thing. However, I do love my Instant Pot. I will say that. I was late to the Instant Pot train, and then I got it I got it as a gift. And ever since, I've been using it for everything. Like I love to store veggie scraps in my freezer, and then I like to make broth in the Instant Pot. I have a recipe for that on my blog actually. And yeah, I love making chicken in the Instant Pot. It's just easy. You throw it in with like a jar of salsa, and then you have chicken that you can use for anything. But what I am a massive fan of is the one pot meal. So that's sort of similar concept, but I have a cast iron Dutch oven, which is probably my most used item in my kitchen. So for things like chili, I've made chili 8,000 different ways. Chili soups, one pot pastas. I'm a huge fan of those. Or like a frittata is another one of my favorite sort of garbage meals where, back when eggs were cheaper, maybe, you put a dozen eggs and a bunch of random, half dead vegetables from your fridge and you've got dinner. So I'm a big fan of things that come together in one pot or one pan. And so, yeah, I guess I have a lot of those on my website as well. I actually just put up a recipe on my blog for a one pan gnocchi with fennel and chicken sausage and broccoli. And it's like one of my favorite things that I've done in the kitchen recently. Another sort of semi homemade thing, but it's pretty next level. So highly recommend it. That sort of thing. That's like my version of the slow cooker is like, what can I dump in a pan or a pot and have it be ready in 30 minutes?
I love that. And I actually saw that recipe. I was going to try it this week and I didn't get to the store to get the ingredients, but I'm going to try it because it looked really good. And I did I bought cauliflower gnocchi at Trader Joe's. They have it in the frozen section. So I was going to try it with the cauliflower gnocchi and see how that works out.
I like that cauliflower gnocchi a lot. So let me know how you like it. I'm very curious to know how it turns out.
Okay, I will. You mentioned on your website that you help teachers simplify and elevate cooking. So I would love to hear some of the ways that we can elevate our cooking without making it more complicated.
One of the things that I love to do the most in my kitchen, and there's several reasons why, is I love to shop my kitchen and sort of pretend that I'm on Chopped. So essentially, I'm like, let me find 5 things that are either they need to be used up, they're almost empty, whatever it is. And let me like base my recipe on that. And let me just kind of go off and try something. And there's some study, I think, that shows that our brain is most creative when it's faced with rules and limitations. And so I really find that I thrive in that environment. And I always end up creating something not just simple because I've removed the guesswork of like, what ingredients am I going to use? Because I'm going to use the ones that are about to go bad, or I'm going to use the ones that are almost empty because I want to get rid of them. So I've simplified in that way. And I usually end up elevating in that I combine 2 flavors or 2 ingredients that I never thought I could, or maybe I haven't in a really long time and I forgot go really well together. So that's an exercise that I really love to do. It's not necessarily what I would recommend, like having all your meals be that. That's sort of like an at the end of the week type thing. I don't love winging it for all of my meals, but like to have a plan. But that is a really fun thing that you can do to simplify and elevate at the same time. And in terms of like actual ingredients or actual cooking techniques, one of the things that I love to do in my cooking is combine different fresh herbs together. So, and this is a technique that I picked up from one of my favorite cookbook authors, which is Yotam Ottolenghi. I don't know if you've read any of his books. I love all of his cookbooks. In a lot of his recipes, he'll have you, put a bunch of different fresh herbs and chop them all up together and put them on the top. And for some people might hear that and they might think, oh gosh, I have to go out and buy like 8 different kinds of herbs. That sounds terrible. But for me, I love having herbs at home because it encourages me to, add something fresh and something bright on top and to combine different types of herbs together. So like, for example, you'll chop up basil and mint and parsley at the same time. You get like this explosion of flavor, which you didn't even have to like do that much, you know? I have a recipe on my blog. I'm sorry, I keep plugging my blog, but I have examples that I'm thinking of maybe to tie back to. I have a recipe for roasted carrots with an herb yogurt, and it has that sort of combination of different herbs in it, and it's the easiest thing, but it's so flavorful and so satisfying, and so that's one of my favorite like little hacks. And also, another technique is sort of opposites attract. So if you're looking for a way to make something more interesting or more elevated, if you have something that's sweet, add some salt. If you have something that's crunchy, add something smooth. Or if you have something that's really rich and fatty, like add something bright, like lemon or herbs. And that sort of those opposites really do attract. It makes this really great balance. And I find that that's one of the easiest ways to elevate your cooking is just by sort of tapping into that.
That's really good. And I never think of like combining the herbs like that, but I have made a couple recipes where they did that and it was so good. So I'll have to remember that. And if people aren't as comfortable as you are in the kitchen, I think there's some apps where you can put in like the things you have in your fridge and it'll give you a recipe that you can use up stuff in your fridge. I don't know the specific app, but I think I've heard of that where you can like say, I have carrots and chicken and whatever, and what can I make with it? And it'll tell you.
If you find out the name of that, please tell me because I've heard of this concept too, and I've never tried it, but I would be really curious to see
Okay, now
how
I'm
that
going to do
works.
some research. Do you think, Sarah, that there's a correlation between the creativity that you feel in the kitchen and the creativity of music?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that the beauty of both cooking and of music is that there's limitless interpretations, even of a specific thing. So if you were to give someone, if you were to give 10 people the same recipe, you would inevitably get 10 different results, even if they followed the recipe to a T, I think. And then similarly, if you were to teach 10 people the same piece of music, you would hear it played 10 completely different ways. And I think that's a really beautiful canvas on which to express ourselves. And, that's one of the reasons why I love cooking is because it's another way for me to express myself. And it sort of takes the pressure off of my primary career as being my sole place of artistic expression, which I think we talked a little bit about earlier, but it's a really wonderful way to exercise your expression. And I don't really have any evidence for this next thing, but I think that it really exercises the same part of your brain that not only forces you to be okay with imperfection, but also forces you to think on your feet. So something that I think is probably pretty relatable to most people who are listening to this because we're musicians and we're trained to really be very exacting is that you need to sort of follow things absolutely to a T, whatever technique you're using when you're playing or whatever. You're very used to doing things in such a specific way to get the result that you want. And that is true sometimes in cooking, you really need like the heat to be precise or whatever. But in general, we're not talking about baking, we're talking about cooking. And I think there's a lot of flexibility with flavor, and it can really encourage us to step outside of that box a little bit and allow ourselves to play and just explore in a way that maybe we don't feel like we have license to do in our musical lives every day because it's our job, And yeah, in terms of thinking on your feet, when we're in a performance, right? If something goes wrong, we have to pivot, play a wrong note, we got to find your way back, right? In cooking, it's sort of the same thing. It's like, oh, oops, I added too much salt. So what am I going to do now? Maybe I'll add some lemon juice because I know that, acid counteracts salt. Or I chopped the veggies too large and now they're taking longer to cook. So what am I going to do? Maybe I'll put a lid on the pot. I don't know.
Yeah.
there's always something. And I think I again, don't have scientific evidence for this, but I really think it sort of exercises that same part of the brain that forces us to course correct.
Yeah, I've never thought of that correlation, but you're right. I have had many, many times in the kitchen and in my music career where I've had to course correct as best I can. Sometimes it goes better than others.
Yep.
So I have a couple of kind of fun questions for you. But before we do that, why don't you talk about the resources that you have available for teachers?
Totally. So if you visit my website, you'll find I have a free guide. My website is thehungrymusician.com. And the guide is called Cooking in Cut Time, which is a really, I love puns. So, it was bound to pop up somewhere. So yeah, essentially it's 5 tips which help you reduce the amount of time that you're spending in the kitchen, or in other ways, simplify your cooking routine. So I highly recommend that guide. There's so much in it. Honestly, I should probably be charging for it at this point because there's a lot in there. So I highly recommend that. My blog is a really great resource for recipes. And then in terms of services that I offer, my primary service I'm doing now is Zoom cooking classes. And I do that for anyone who's interested. So I do that for individuals. I've had, individual musicians come and take a cooking class with me. It's very fun, one-on-one, small groups, large groups too. So studios of young musicians. I've done college age workshops. Everyone can benefit a cooking class, and everyone always has a good time. So, and it's on Zoom, so you can do it from anywhere, which is great.
That sounds so fun. I love that. All right. So I have 2 fun questions. The first one is, what is your favorite thing to cook?
I mean, if it wasn't already evident from like the 3 times that I've mentioned it already, but pasta. I love cooking pasta. There's just something, I mean, obviously pasta's delicious. I think that's not up for debate, right? If it is up for debate, I wasn't aware. But there's something about sitting down to a bowl of pasta that's just so satisfying. And also the alchemy of a sauce coming together, especially when you have, you add the pasta water and it all just comes together just so. Like it's so easy to make, and yet you can really elevate it. It's a blank canvas. You can add anything you want. I love cooking pasta.
Yeah, it's so versatile. And it's kind of one of those, it's not, I wouldn't call it a garbage. What'd you call it? Garbage can meal? A garbage? What did you call it? But you could do like kind of have your pasta as the base and then have your protein and your veggies and your sauce and kind of mix and match all the different things, right?
Absolutely. And it can also be a very budget friendly meal, right? Because, pasta is generally, you can get it very cheap. You can throw a can of tuna in it, or some anchovies or some other kind of fish, or, tinned protein, right? And then add a shallot, I don't know, some garlic, and then you have a perfectly delicious bowl of pasta.
Yes, I'm a big pasta girl too.
Yes.
All right. And then this is kind of another fun question. If you could go anywhere in the world and have an amazing meal, where would you go and what would you eat?
Oh my goodness. If it's somewhere that I haven't been yet, I would probably say Japan. And I don't know that I have a specific meal that I could say, I would like you to feed me this. But I mean, I love raw seafood. I love raw fish. I love sushi, sashimi, all of that. But I don't know. I've just had a lot of friends go to Japan recently and post pictures of the various meals they've eaten there, and they just all look fantastic. So I don't know that I would choose a specific thing. I would just want to go to Japan and have someone put food in front of me and be like, there you go.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah.
Well, Sarah, this was so good. I loved talking about all these different tips for teachers. Is there anything else you wanted to share before we close? Anything that I forgot or didn't ask you about that you want to share?
If you want to find me, I'm on Instagram mostly. My handle is @hungrymusician. I'm on TikTok too, but I don't post on there quite as much. I'm sort of like an elder millennial. And so I haven't quite like gotten on the TikTok train yet. But yeah, so I'm on Instagram and TikTok. My handle's at Hungry Musician. And then my blog is thehungrymusician.com.
Okay, great. We'll put those in the show notes as well. Thank you so much for being here and sharing all these fun tips with us.
Thank you, Rachel. I really appreciate it.
When I started a piano podcast, I never thought I'd be testing recipes, but here we are. So I wanted to report to you all that I did try the sausage fennel gnocchi recipe, and it was delicious. I highly recommend it. It was easier than I expected, actually, to put together, and the flavors were exquisite. The one thing I would do differently next time is that I did use the frozen cauliflower gnocchi from Trader Joe's that I mentioned on the episode, and I ended up cooking the whole thing quite a bit longer than the recipe said because the gnocchi started out frozen. And the gnocchi was actually still pretty mushy, which I actually don't mind mushy food, which I know that's weird, but if I were making it for someone else, I would probably pan fry or air fry the cauliflower gnocchi first before putting it on the sheet pan to crisp it up a little. Or you can do the way the recipe suggests and just use regular shelf-stable gnocchi. So thank you, Sarah, for turning me into a food critic here and introducing me to a new recipe. If you haven't listened to the Topcast lately, be sure to check out this week's episode with Andrea Dow from Teach Piano Today. I know that's going to be a good one. Next week on the podcast, I'll be talking about online music teaching with the ladies from Little Chords, so make sure you tune in for that episode. I'm Rachel Ehring, and you've been listening to the Top Music Piano Podcast. I'll talk with you again very soon.
How do you keep up to date with all the latest trends and research into music education? How do you connect with other teachers around the world and make sure your teaching stays fresh and relevant for students of all ages and stages both now and into the future? I created our Top Music Pro membership to be the one-stop shop for music teaching resources, training, support and community, and I'd love for you to come and join us inside. With over 40 comprehensive training courses, hundreds of teaching demonstrations and lesson plans, free monthly sheet music, discounts, and all the business and pedagogy support you could ever need, Top Music Pro is the community you've been looking for. If you're ready to level up your learning from the podcast and join thousands of other teachers in our global network, head over to topmusicpro.com today.